Hey Who fans, and welcome to the Big Blue Box podcast. My name's Gary.
My name's Adam.
And we're at episode 124.
124.
One day, I shall come back.
Oh dear, we are in trouble, aren't we?
I've reversed the polarity of the neutron flow, so the TARDIS should be free of the force field now.
I have the advantage of being slightly ahead of you. Sometimes behind you, but normally ahead of you.
The trouble with time travel is, one never seems to find the time.
Change, my dear. And it seems not a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding, etc., etc.
A meteor storm that the sky above us was dancing with lights. Purple, green, brilliant yellow, yes!
I'm the doctor, by the way. What's your name?
Rose.
Nice to meet you, Rose.
Run for your life.
It's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Just remember who's standing in your way. Look at the eyebrows. These are attack eyebrows. You can take bottle tops off with these.
Howdy do, Who fans. And welcome to 124. Hope you've had a cracking week, and that you've managed to do something Doctor Who related in this very quiet January.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Well, quiet in terms of Doctor Who stuff, but you and I have been really busy for some reason.
Yeah.
Don't we? We were saying before we started recording, it's like, have you stopped yet since the new year? It's just been mental.
I was just saying about work, wasn't I? I thought January was supposed to be quiet, and work's been quite busy. I did have a very interesting chat about Doctor Who at work, actually.
So did I. Go on, you go
was
first.
Was it yesterday or the day before? Oh, you did as well?
Yeah.
Because they were asking what I do in my spare time. They're like, why do you always have to have Wednesdays off and all this? I was like, well, that's my day when I do my Doctor Who stuff. And they're like, Doctor Who? It's like these two chef guys. And yeah, it was quite... There was a lot of cliched things coming out that I hear people... You know, the sort of thing you hear that people say, and people are actually saying them in real life. So, for example, they were like, oh, is that still on, is it? You know, oh, I haven't watched Doctor Who in years, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And the girl, I've just started working with a very nice girl, actually. She came out with the classic. She's like, who's the Doctor now? Is it that really old guy? And I was just like... Yeah, you know, when you sort of you start off by trying to defend the show, but then after a couple of minutes, you just realise that you really haven't got the energy. So they were like firing all these questions at me, and I was just like, no. So yeah, it was quite interesting to hear that, because they're clearly, one of the chefs was like, oh, I liked it when, you know, David Tennant was in it, and I was like, oh god, these are all things that I read on Twitter, and now you're a real person actually saying it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was quite an interesting chat, but I didn't convert them over. They weren't ready to come back and watch Unearthly Child with me.
They weren't having none of it.
No, because I was like, they're like, what are you doing today? When you finish today, then? And they were like, oh, you're building a Dalek. And I was like, no, I'm actually going back to watch the very first episode ever, because we're reviewing it this week. And they were like, oh, right, yeah. You know, it was just, yeah, it was quite a funny, interesting conversation, but I didn't get very far with it. No. Well, how come you were chatting about Who at work?
Well, somebody asked me what I thought of the Christmas special.
Ah, right, okay.
And I gave them my thoughts, and they thought it was actually very good.
Yeah.
They thought it was very good, and somebody then asked me, how comes he hasn't got a proper companion, because he's just knocking about with this bald guy at the moment. Yeah. And then someone else said, oh, he's a regular now. I'm sure that's Matt Lucas. And I went through a bit of backstory about when he was in the last Christmas special, and you know, we don't really know why he's back yet, because he was decapitated before, but now he's back and all that stuff. And then they said, well, it doesn't really happen to companions, does it? And I said, well, you know, companions don't really have the best luck sometimes with traveling with the Doctor. I said, we've had a companion properly killed off before, and they were like, oh, no way. I was like, yeah, back in the Davison era. And so I started going through all this stuff, and then this was during our morning. So every morning we have what's called a stand-up, and we go through the tasks for the day and all this stuff. And our manager was late, and someone went, oh, you've missed a seminar, you've missed a Doctor Who seminar from Gary, and he just didn't look that bothered at all about missing that. So yeah, it's interesting. I also had a conversation with work colleagues regarding Who, but they also just sort of, you know, smile nicely, and you know, I'm sure they appreciate my excitement when I get talking about it. But yeah,
No, more than mine. Then my two just were they were in a very. I got on very well with the guys at work. It was all very much done in jest, but yeah, I think it's fair to say they were sort of ripping it out of me for a bit. But no, the reason I found it interesting is because it did. It's very much in contrast to when I can remember speaking about Doctor Who when I was working somewhere else many years ago when it was at the height of its popularity. So David Tennant was the Doctor. I can remember there was a Woolworths up the road. I used to go there. I used to pop in every day just to see if they'd got any new Doctor Who figures. And quite often they had. So it was quite an exciting time. It's like, they've got a, Clockwork Soldier out. We didn't have that last week and all that. So it's quite exciting. But I do remember the conversations back then were very different because they didn't like Doctor Who either. The two guys I worked with there. But they knew that I loved it. But they couldn't really say anything bad about it because it was cool for the first time in years. It was like, oh yeah, it's really popular now, isn't it? Oh, the sets don't wobble anymore, do they? Oh, Daleks can fly now, can't they? Oh, so they couldn't really. They had no comeback. Right, whereas the conversation I was having yesterday or whatever was very much like going back to when I was at school. It was just like, yeah, it's rubbish now though, isn't it? It's like, no, it's not rubbish actually. It's like, yeah, but it's no one watches it anymore, do they? Like, well, they do. And it was just like, oh, it's not. Everything's changed. It's like I can't. It's not. I haven't got the ammo anymore.
Yeah.
So it's a bit depressing, really.
Yeah, it's a shame. I think it's kind of leaked into the public consciousness.
It has.
The downward spiral of the popularity of the show in general, because, and it is a real shame because I remember when I wasn't watching Doctor Who regularly, when you say like the height of it was when Tennant was the Doctor, I think, and I remember just being very aware of it.
Yeah,
everywhere. I mean, there was, I think I can't remember what story it was or what DVD, but on the special features, on one of the Tennant series, I think it was series 2 or 3, where as part of the special features, he kept like a video diary. And he got invited to turn on the Christmas lights somewhere. I think it was down in Brighton. Oh, I can't remember. Some town anyway. And the whole town was just plastered everywhere with posters of Doctor Who, and it had Tennant on it and Billy Piper and Freema, and it was, and everybody knew who they were.
Yeah,
that's even if they didn't watch the program, it's like, that's the Doctor, and I know that she's the companion. That must be the newer companion, and it was just very, very much there, a bit like Star Wars. It's just very. Even if you're not a sci-fi fan, or if you hadn't seen the films, you know who Darth Vader was. You know who Luke Skywalker. You just know.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think that's the case anymore. I don't think people know who. I think I can confidently say they know that Capaldi is the Doctor. That's quite obvious. But I think if you said, who's this person? Say if you showed them a picture of Danny Pink. Yeah, they'd be like, oh, I've no idea. Well, who's that?
Say, well, he's the guy who does the Ginster Pies, isn't he? Was he the guy on the... He did actually do adverts for him, didn't he? On the side of that. So, yeah, I know. Yeah, that's very true, actually. Would they know Clara? Well, possibly. I think... They'd be like, oh, there's Victoria.
Yeah.
It's Queen Victoria.
Yeah, and I think so. And I mean, they probably... Well, would they know River Song, maybe? I don't know.
It's interesting, though, because the girl I've just started working with, she said, I liked David Tennant. I was like, yeah. She's like, but I didn't like Matt Smith. But the thing I liked about that was she did know his name. I was just because I was like, oh, so you didn't like Matt Smith? She said, no, I didn't like him. That's when I stopped watching. He was too silly. And I was like, yeah, but he was really good. And that's when I started getting on the soapbox trying to defend. I was like, no, Matt was really good. It was just his stories that were rubbish. But I like the fact she, like she said, she knew the name. But when it got to Capaldi, she was the one that said, oh, is he the old guy? That seems to be how a lot of people know him. Oh, is that the old one?
Yeah.
And it's a shame, actually.
It almost feels like we've kind of regressed into what Doctor Who was like back in the classic era. Because back then, with the exception of Peter Davison, I don't think any of the Doctors were cast for their, to appeal to the ladies, put it that way.
Yeah.
And I think when Tennant took the role, I think a lot of that popularity had to do with his good looks and, all that, which is just natural. It's It's just the way it is, I guess. But I feel like now because we badgered the Moff and the BBC for so long that we wanted an older Doctor again, because the last couple had been very young, and and they were like, okay, there you go. And now it's kind of, we've regressed back into what Classic Who was like.
Yeah, it does. I mean, that is the thing. I think that's why I found the conversation interesting, because obviously I've been here once before, back in the late 80s. I've been there before, and I've experienced all this, and that's why it was so great to have then been in. Once we got into 2005, to be like, hey, I'm a Doctor Who fan, shouting it from the roof, and now I feel like I'm going down the stairs of that building to the middle floor and being like, I'm a Doctor Who fan. So but I want to be climbing back up and shouting it from the roof again. I think it can happen. I mean, it's a natural thing, I guess, for something that's, how long has it been back now? Over 10 years, isn't it? So it's, there's bound to be blips, there's bound to be ups and downs. As long as we go back up, we'll be okay. And I mean, I think I was going to say, that there's a hardcore fan base there. I think there always will be. But as long as the quality is still there, I don't think we have anything to worry about. I mean, the stories have definitely taken a dip in writing quality, but there's nothing to stop that turning around.
Absolutely,
at all, and it is good that people watch the Christmas special. Like you said, your friend you were talking to, I'm assuming he hasn't watched it for a while, so it's good that he's seen that and thought, well, actually I quite enjoyed that, maybe I'll watch it when it comes back. So,
yes, but it's
definitely crossed.
It's definitely I mean, you and I could probably do an entire podcast about all this stuff, but I've got a gut feeling that the next Doctor after Capaldi, whether it be male or female, will be a younger Doctor.
Oh, almost certainly.
I've got a gut, because they probably know that stuff. They probably know that if they get a nice looking, young guy back in, that's going to draw, a certain number of certain fans back to the show, should I say?
Yeah.
Like it was back in the Tennant years. I don't know.
Yeah. The thing is, it's only part of it, because I think people just assume because Peter Capaldi is old that he can't be, you can still cast a very dashing older gent as long as he's written well, and as long as he gets stuck in and you can still make somebody a really good character that people can relate to. I think, a lot of people will write Capaldi off just because he's old, but then if, when they watch him, he's still quite sprightly. Do you know what I mean? It's not as if he's hobbling around on a stick for most of the episode, and they haven't got like a young companion doing all the work for him or anything. So, it's all down to how they're written. And
absolutely, yeah. And fair play to the Beeb for casting Capaldi at his age. I mean, he's not mega old, but he is an older gentleman compared to the very young Matt Smith and David Tennant. But fair play, because if you think about the James Bond character, it used to be a sort of a more again, not necessarily very old actors played the part, but certainly older gentlemen were Bond, and now we're into like the modern world, if you like. Since the past 10 years, it's been a younger guy, but they've kind of bucked that trend and gone. And that's a good thing that they should hold on to with Doctor Who. And when I said it's my gut feeling that they'll take on a younger actor to play the Doctor, that doesn't mean that I necessarily think they should. I think that that's the great thing about the Doctor. It can be anybody, old, young. That's the great thing about that character. But as long as they cast somebody that's right for the role, not just because he's young, then it will be good. It'll all be good, I reckon.
No, that's a good point, actually. And one other thing, just to sort of quickly wrap this up, is if you think about it, a lot of the people that were watching Doctor Who when Tennant was the Doctor would have been a certain age, and we all, as we get older, fall in and out of love with things, especially TV programs. I mean, I don't know what age it would have been, but I can remember having a whole wall dedicated to Doctor Who, and then getting to sort of around about 21 maybe, I can't remember now, but thinking, I'm a bit old to have Daleks on the shelf, I'm a bit old to have a Doctor Who poster on the wall. So I can remember taking all that down, and still watching it, but it not being a very central part of my life like it has become again. So you've got to remember that there's a lot of that key audience that would have got to that sort of teenagery stage and have moved on from the show.
Yeah.
And they'll probably, a bit like us, some of them will come back to it because once you've done all your adulty stuff, all your teenagey stuff, you start to go back to being nostalgic and checking out things you used to love. And I used to love the Daleks, so that core audience, some of that will come back round as well. So again, it's just a natural thing of time, isn't it? It's just things change and move on. Yeah,
change, my dear.
Change, my dear.
Yeah, that's it.
So yeah, so it's interesting. We both had chats at work, though. It's good that people are talking about it. That's
at least, yes,
yeah.
Because I'd hate to think that people had no clue at all what was going on. At least people are talking, like you say, at least talking about it, and even if they're not watching it regularly, at least they've watched an episode.
Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah. Right. Now that we've thrown our 2 cents in there, and we've put the world to right where it concerns what should and shouldn't happen with who and so on, shall we land it and do some chat on ratings and so on?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Class first.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. So, Class has now been broadcast on domestic TV.
On a real, actual television box.
Yes, a really old CRT one.
Tuning in.
With the rounded corners, yeah. Anyway, it went out on BBC One. And it went out on the, what did you call it? The
graveyard shift.
The graveyard shift, yeah. So it went out quite late, didn't it? And although the content in Class is relatively adult in a couple of places, I'm not sure it warrants the 11:15 slot.
No. I mean, we had Silent Witness on the other night, and that was pretty gross in places, and that goes out at 9:00. I mean, they were, well, I won't say what they were doing, but it was gross to do with gore and stuff. So yeah, 11:15 does feel quite late. I mean,
maybe they didn't have a choice too much, but it does seem quite late for. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's not too late. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it just seems like a 9:00 thing to me.
Yeah, I would have said 9. I mean, there are a few bits in it that are a bit but I would have said 9 would have been all right, considering what goes out at 9:00 these days. The only thing is, you're right, there might not have been much choice left in the schedule. But then again, Class has been out there since, when did they first announce it? They've had all this time to plan it.
Yes.
It does feel to me like, because it didn't do very well on the iPlayer, I don't know if that's had any effect on it, but it does feel to me that they've just thought, we'll just shove that there then. They've already written it off, I feel like, by putting it at that time slot, because they showed the first 2, didn't they? So the first episode 1 went out at 11:15, and then they followed it straight after with episode 2 would have been at an hour later, so 20 to 12.
20 to midnight.
Hour and a half later, yeah.
Yeah. And it hasn't done it it didn't really do fantastically on iPlayer, did it?
No, it didn't, no.
When we spoke about it before Christmas. And so episode 1, just under 1 million viewers. And the BBC have got, for that particular time slot, they have an average, which they would expect. And the average is 1.6 odd for that time slot in the evening. So it's a bit behind. And although they have tried to kind of sweeten it a little bit, though, by saying that it did get more than BBC 2's Newsnight, which got 6.65 million viewers, and it also got more than ITV's Through the Keyhole, which got 0.75. Now, for me, I don't know about anyone else, but I would expect it to be a boring old program like Through the Keyhole. I don't know if anyone knows of Through the Keyhole. It was very popular back in sort of the late 80s.
Yeah.
Where it was essentially a celebrity turns up and they show various segments of that celebrity's house, and then the panel have to guess who the house belongs to. So they don't know who the celebrity is at the beginning. And it's a very bad program, let me be honest with you. So I'm quite glad that it beat through the keyhole. But yes, and then the episode after that only got 0.4 million views.
But that would have been way past midnight on a Monday night. I mean, you not being funny, but you're not. If you haven't already seen this show, are you really gonna sit up and until midnight to watch it? I think they've very much aimed this at the online audience, and I think this is almost a token sort of here it is on the real screen for anyone that might want to watch it. It does feel like they've kind of lost heart with it already, which I wasn't a fan of it. I didn't think it was a particularly good program anyway, but it is still sad to see them just discard it like this. I would have liked to have seen it got a proper chance, because there were people that enjoyed it. So that's not to say some people haven't even heard of Class. We know it's out there, but there are people out there that might have just jumped on board. Had they been flicking through and seen this on at 9 o'clock, they might have thought, oh, what's going on here?
Yeah.
The Doctor's on the TV. What's this? On episode 1. So to put it at this, for want of a better word, graveyard slot, does very much feel like the BBC have just said, oh, we'll forget about that. And the low figures for the online and the TV show does make it even less unlikely for a second series, I think. Although they obviously plan to do one. I just don't know.
I reckon it will get a second series, and that'll be it.
I think it will.
Yeah.
I think it will get one more, and that'll be it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they have said that for both these episodes that went out, it did beat the programs that are on the 4 main channels. And when we talk about the 4 main channels, that's BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, and Channel 4.
Yeah.
And I think do they include Channel 5? They must do.
Probably.
But yeah, so it did beat the other programs in terms of views. However, that's not very difficult, because it's just the news through the keyhole and whatever tosh is on Channel 5.
Yeah, it's always tosh on Channel 5, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's not like it's going up against Coronation Street, EastEnders, and something else, Strictly or anything like that. So you would expect it to at least, do well when you're up against, that caliber of show. So it's not good news for Class, and it
is a shame. I do, although I didn't like the show, I do feel sorry for the guys involved, because Patrick Ness, he's really put his heart into this. As I said, I didn't think it was written particularly well, but the cast, they really did try. Everybody involved has tried. You can't knock that. I mean, even though I didn't think it was very good, they have tried to make a good show. You can feel there is a lot of passion in it, is what I'm trying to say. So I do feel sorry for them in that respect. And so part of me thinks, maybe it should get a second chance. But I am surprised by the low figures online. I've got to be honest. I did think it would fare decently online. I thought, people are going to tune in because it's Connected.2, whether it's good or bad. So I am surprised it sort of died a death on iPlayer. I have to admit, maybe that's down to publicity. As I said, I still think there's a lot of people out there don't even know it exists.
Absolutely, yeah.
I
so
they need to get it out there. Well, they tried to create their own fan base, didn't they? Which kind of actually backfired, because it seemed to more turn people against it more than anything, because people were like, well, that's so clearly engineered. It kind of backfired on them a little bit, I think. So, not good news.
No, I didn't even know that Class was on.
No.
BBC One until this morning, where we're looking through stuff to talk about. I didn't even realise it had been on. So, it does. But then again, as is the world of Doctor Who, there's not really much money to do plenty on,
It just needs a bit more publicity, I think.
Yeah.
If they're going to make it succeed. If they do a second series, they need to get some publicity out there.
Yeah.
Just going on to other ratings, though, well, I would say better news. It's not an amazing figure, but it's a decent figure. It's the Christmas special. Return of Dr. Mysterio got an official rating of 7.83 million. That's the final figure. So it came 9th, I think, on the day out of programmes, which it's not bad, really, for a show that's been off air for a year and doesn't, like we were saying earlier, is kind of not really must-see television anymore, is it really? I mean, it is for us fans, but it's not like it's not the big Christmas Day program that it was. So it's still quite decent, I think, to come in ninth watch program.
Yes, I mean for the week it beat EastEnders.
Good.
It didn't beat Corrie.
No.
It didn't beat the Great Christmas Bake Off, which was understandable.
Well, that's no surprise. Yeah.
Yeah, and a couple other things, but obviously it didn't beat Strictly.
Mm.
But yeah, it beat EastEnders and Emmerdale and yeah.
All that lot. It's slightly higher figure than last year. So Husbands of River Song got 7.69 million last year. So it's ever so slightly higher. We were just, there's a graph on Doctor Who news site. We were looking at this just before we started recording. And you can see the difference between, I think the last time we got over 10 million was the last Matt Smith special. What was that called? Time of the Doctor.
Yes, 11.14.
Yeah,
views.
That's the last time we were over 10 million. And then it dropped to 8.28 million with the Nick Frost one, Last Christmas.
Last Christmas, yeah.
Yeah, they're so good I can't even remember the name of them. So yeah, that's quite a big drop. So from 2013, 2014, we've had a massive drop in viewing statistics. And then, yeah, the last two have just got over 7 million. So, but still, it's good. At least it's in the top 10. And like we said earlier, people seem to have tuned in, haven't watched for a while. So, yeah, hopefully, it'd be nice to see us going back on the up.
Yes, hopefully. And when you and I spoke about this earlier, looking at this graph, we were quite surprised by a couple of them, weren't we? Because
yes,
the highest rated ever Christmas special since 2005 is Voyage of the Damned, which got 13.3 something million viewers. And you and I were sort of talking about, well, that's quite understandable because Kylie's in it, so that's good sort of eye candy for the lads, and Tennant's in it in his tuxedo, and that's eye candy for the ladies. And, all in all, it's, like you said, the story's okay up to a point. But yeah, I think more for the sort of the eye candy aspect of it, it raked in a load of.
I seem to remember liking it. It's a while since I've watched it, but yeah, I seem to remember it was a fairly decent Christmas special. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were saying that the first two Christmas specials, so the Sycorax story, what's that? Tennant's first.
Christmas Invasion.
The Christmas Invasion. That's
it,
yeah. And then The Runaway Bride. They actually did, they did better than the recent few years of Christmas specials, but there's a huge jump up to Voyage of the Damned after that. And we were thinking, well, there was no iPlayer statistics there to boost it up a bit.
That's true.
And also we were saying that the whole Catherine Tate coming onto the show thing kind of stumped fans for a bit before, didn't they? They were, even though I wasn't watching Doctor Who regularly back then, I do remember the whole uproar of fans complaining that she was going to be in the show and she was going to ruin it and she wasn't a suitable actress to be in it and all that stuff. But how she proved them all wrong.
Proved us all wrong, including me. Yeah.
And one thing, the most surprising one out of all of it for me though is the 2009, the David Tennant's last story. Is it The End of Time?
Yeah, parts 1 and 2.
Part 1 and 2. I would have thought that one would have got a massive, because that's Tennant's very last one. And he was such a popular Doctor, and it would have been really intriguing to see how he went, because that would have been, the whole big regeneration scene as well. That would have been the new Doctor and everything. I'm surprised that came in at, what was it, 4th place? Yeah. So the year after, the 2010, what was it, the A Christmas Carol. Was it Christmas Carol? No, what was one with?
Yeah, it's Christmas Carol. Yeah.
So that got 12.11 million, and this one, The End of Time, Part 1 and 2, got 12.4.
See, I can't get my head around that.
That's weird, isn't it?
Cannot think that A Christmas Carol would have beat the last episode of Tennant, because there was such a big thing about him leaving, and everyone knew it was coming. And I am surprised by that. I have to question it a bit, actually. I'm not sure that can be right, but yeah, it does seem strange. Because that was the big one.
Yeah, so, let's also not forget the Christmas specials. They're not generally regarded as the best that Doctor Who has to offer. So, and I think that's kind of, when you look at the ratings, it's sort of indicative of what the Christmas special is about, really. And you can see that it is going downhill. But fortunately, like you say, the return of Dr. Mysterio has popped up a little bit. It's done, which is a good thing, because if it had got beaten by the Husbands of River Song, then we would have potentially just thrown the headphones off, turned the mic off, and that would have been it.
Called it a day.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I feel like I need to go and watch Voyage of the Damned now. Actually, it's so long since I've watched that. I feel like a bit of what they called the host, the gold robots.
Oh yeah.
I seem to remember I really like it until Max comes into it. I remember thinking, what? But I haven't watched it for a while. I don't know. Christmas is over now. I might save it till next year. Give it a rewatch.
I was going to say, we're not going to watch it now, are we?
No, too Christmassy.
It's a bit. I mean, that is a fairly decent Christmas one as well.
Yeah,
it's not too bad. Please, can you tell me? Please, can you reel off the name of the little red spiky dude, please?
Oh no, what is he called? Balacalif? Oh no, I don't know.
Come on.
Was I close? Is it Balacalif? Castro?
Banacafalata.
Does it begin with B?
Banacafalata.
Banacafalata. Yeah.
The little red guy.
Yeah, that's it. Forgot about him. Yeah. It's good, and it's got Clive Swift.
Oh
yeah.
So that's it for
it's got it all
for news. There really isn't much sort of kicking about.
No.
But we have got a couple of cute little pieces of merch to do though. So shall we bring the Daleks in?
Yeah.
Merch corner. Merch corner. Merch corner. I don't know whether to be impressed or disgusted.
It's a bit rubbish, but it's pretty. It's very pretty.
Playmobil.
Playmobil.
Do you remember Playmobil?
I do. Yeah, this was a thing. And I'm really glad we're talking about this, because I think a lot of people that have been saying these look awful don't know that these are a thing. They're not something new that they've thought this is cool. These are a classic toy that they've brought the Doctor Who range to. So I love them.
Yes. So Playmobil, for those of you that don't know, has been around longer than we've been alive.
Yeah.
And it's essentially a very, very simplistic version of Lego.
Yeah.
So Playmobil is for like the very small little toddlers to sort of get their first steps into building stuff before they get onto Lego, which is a bit more intricate, slightly. So Playmobil is very basic. It's like, it's just really basic stuff. But the figures themselves look very similar to Lego. They've got like the C-shaped hands and, very simple facial expressions and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, go ahead, mate, because you were quite enthusiastic and excited about these.
Yeah, because these were announced last year, but we've got some good sort of high-res pictures of the actual product now. And I didn't know Funko were attached to this until yesterday, so that's quite interesting. But no, the reason I got a little bit excited there is because I think these look cool, and I've read a lot of negative comments from people saying, what is this? What are the BBC thinking about? And I don't think they realise that this is not a new thing. This is not something that someone sat down a couple of months ago and sort of drawn and thought, oh, that's good. We'll make those. This is a classic toy that has now moved on to feature some of the Doctors, and I think it's brilliant.
Yes.
So far, I think, is it only the 2 Doctors we're getting so far at the minute?
At the minute, yeah.
The 4th Doctor and the 11th Doctor, and then there's going to be more to come, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I am quite excited about these just because I remember them as a kid. I used to have some Playmobil stuff, and I just think it's really cool to have Doctor Who join in that little universe, if you like. So yeah, I'm quite excited by this. I do get why people might, say somebody who's a lot younger than me, they might look at this and just think, what the hell? Mm-hmm. And they might think that Funko have sort of branched into trying a new range as it's attached to them. So I get it. I get why people are like, maybe not as infused as me, but yeah, I think they look cool. I love the 4th Doctor's got his Sonic as well, which is looking good.
The 11th Doctor has his Sonic as well.
Oh, so he has, yeah.
But here's the thing. They're not meant to be like this whole new it might develop into that, this whole new craze of collectibles like the like the pop figures and all that stuff. It is meant to be sort of cute. They do look very cute. That's the thing, they are very cute little things. I'm not sure how tall are these. They're 6 inches, so that's like half a school ruler. And they do look quite cute. And Funko have kind of dived into it as well, because some of the other franchises, there's Ghostbusters, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Back to the Future, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So they've launched with some quite sort of high profile franchises, and it's good that Doctor Who is included in that. Because we waited for so long for the pop figures in that range. How many years and years? I mean, I did some as some design work for Funko. This was going back in 2014, I think, something like that. And while I was doing some work for them, I said to them, "When are you guys going to bring Doctor Who? In the pop for now?" I was like, and they kept saying, we've had various conversations with the BBC and we just can't get them to commit to the license yet, but we're banging away and we're going to do it. So it took quite a while for Who to come to the pop range. So it's great that this range has launched with Doctor Who included. So it is good. And I think they're about 15 quid, aren't they? Yeah,
I mean, I will agree that that is perhaps a little pricey, but yeah, I agree with you. It's great to have them as part of this. I mean, Playmobil is quite a big thing. Overall, it's quite, like you said, it's quite a big. It's a bit like Lego. It's a big company to be part of. So it is great to see Doctor Who being, in that range. Yeah, alongside all those other classics as well.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, 15 quid. Ooh, a little bit more than I thought, but
yeah, but that's Well, we'll see.
Are they going to do a TARDIS? Doesn't have it on there,
sure.
But I don't know. Because they used to do vehicles as well, didn't they? I can remember going into my local toy shop as a kid, and there used to be a whole massive stand of Playmobil stuff, and there'd be all sorts. There'd be figures and ambulances and houses. They used to do everything, didn't they? So I'm assuming they'll do some little bits like that. Yeah.
I mean, I might dip my toe in. I might pick up the Fourth Doctor one.
He looks good.
He does look pretty good. Yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah.
If you're into that, though, then check it out. Not much other merch going on. If you're into comics, I know you, mate, you were really liking your Third Doctor Titan
They're
comic.
really good, yeah.
The fourth edition's out this week. So we're recording this today on Wednesday the 11th. It should be out now, depending on if you're a digital reader or you like your physical comic. But issue number 4 is dropped this week.
Yes.
And that's going to do for news and merch. Let me just set the scene here. Adam, my good friend. What are we going to review this week?
You're going to electrocute me if I touch the console, are you?
What are we doing this week, buddy?
This week, man, make fire. Fire. It is, of course, we're going right the way back to the beginning, the start of it all, with an unearthly child.
So you still challenge me, young man?
Oh, just open the doors and prove your point.
You're so narrow-minded, aren't you? Don't be so insular.
Grandfather, do you know where we are?
Yes, we've gone back in time, all right. 1 or 2 samples, and I should be able to make an estimate. The rock pieces and a few plants. But I do wish this wouldn't keep letting me down. However, we can go out now.
Just a minute. You say we've gone back in time?
Yes, quite so.
So that when we go out of that door, we won't be in a junkyard in London, in England, in the year 1963.
That is quite correct. Your tone suggests ridicule.
But it is ridiculous. Time doesn't go round and round in circles. You can't get on and off whenever you like in the past or the future.
Really? Where does time go, then?
It doesn't go anywhere. It just happens and then it's finished.
Oh. You're not as doubtful as your friend, I hope.
No.
Barbara, you can't.
I can't help it. I just believe them, that's
If you could touch the alien sand and hear the cries of strange birds and watch them wheel in another sky, would that satisfy you?
Yes.
See for yourself.
It's not true. It can't be.
That's not on the screen.
Well, I've no more time to argue with you. I must get some samples,
Susan. Be careful, Grandfather.
An unearthly child.
I was really enjoying that. I think I could just sit and listen to the audio.
Oh, don't, mate.
Yeah, just, wow.
It's magic.
It is.
So, where it all started, this went out, first of all, the 23rd of November, 1963. I'm sure most Who fans know that date.
Yep.
In their sleep. 23rd of November, 63, important day. So this went out. It was directed by Waris Hussein, written by Anthony Coburn.
Yeah.
And C.E. Weber. And it was obviously produced by the awesome Verity Lambert.
Oh, yep.
And if you haven't, before we kick off in the review and stuff like that, anyone listening that hasn't watched An Adventure in Time and Space, starring, is it David Bradley, isn't it? Yeah.
David Bradley, yeah.
Yeah, if you haven't seen that, and some of these names don't ring a bell or anything like that, if you watch that, it gives you, don't get me wrong, it is a dramatisation. It's not a documentary or anything like that, but it is fairly accurate in most things. It does kind of bend the timeline and the what really happened a little bit, but for the most part, it's quite an interesting watch, and it does explain how Verity Lambert very much struggled, to be seen as as a proper producer because of back in the early 60s, it was the BBC was quite sexist and
quite male orientated. Is that the word?
Yeah,
dominated.
Viewed as a bit of a boys' club and
and
so on. So it's a fascinating story about how it. And to his credit, Mark Gatiss did a brilliant job with that.
It's fantastic, actually. I feel like watching that this afternoon, actually. No?
Yes,
it's really good. Yeah,
I would say that's probably his finest work.
Oh,
involved with Doctor Who. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
So anyway, 4-parter, 25 minutes each, and straight off. And so, An Unearthly Child sort of encompasses. Not many people sort of refer to the names of all 4 episodes in this collection, if you like. It's normally, when they talk about the first few, it's normally wrapped up in An Unearthly Child, even though that's just the name of the very first episode. So An Unearthly Child, next one is The Cave of Skulls, then The Forest of Fear, and then The Firemaker. And that kind of makes up this first block, or this first initial story, if you like. And straight off the bat, buddy, I would say that these, especially the first episode, An Unearthly Child, is just pure magic to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a great way of summing it up, actually.
Yeah. I mean, just playing that audio clip then, I'm just lost. I'm just transported off downstairs to my sofa with a cup of tea and shutting the world off. And it's just, there's nothing, it's very, very basic in terms of its production and it's what's actually going on. However, I would probably take this over quite a big handful of stories that have come out since 2005.
Oh yeah,
it's just, there's obviously the nostalgia effect, because it's in black and white and it's the olden days and all that stuff. It has got a certain charm about it from that respect, but it also, I mean, we'll come on to more of the story and stuff, but it's just fascinating to watch because there's no backstory. There's no explaining who the Doctor is. There's no explaining really what's going on. It's just a couple of school teachers concerned about a student. They bump into this crazy old grumpy man and then they're off. This was the very first episode. Can you imagine a series going out now or a film, in sci-fi that doesn't have some kind of exposition and explains what's going on and there's no prologue and there's no, they'd be insane. They'd be like, what are you doing? You can't just pick up and expect people to come along on the journey and know what's going on. It's just incredible. Yeah. It's,
we did.
And I'm pretty sure, because back in the day with sci-fi, like going back in the early 60s, it was very much the old school, what's going on, sort of Flash Gordon,
all
of that old, really old sci-fi. But even then on those, like the old Flash Gordons, you had like the You know, like the opening crawl, like we have in Star Wars, where it tells you what's going to happen. So it says, you know, Flash Gordon's doing this, and this has happened, and now we're off, and this. But with this one, it's like, no, we're not going to tell you anything. You just need to trust us and come along for the. It's brilliant.
It's something different. You're right. It's something different. I think one of my favourite things I remember Colin Baker ever saying was, asked, you know, when he started watching Doctor Who, he said, you know, I watched the very first one. He said, I popped round to a friend's house. I leant in the doorway to see what he was watching. And 25 minutes later, I realised I was still stood in the doorway. He said, I was just transfixed by it. And that's exactly how I feel. I watch it, and I've watched the first episode quite a lot of times. I've watched that one a lot because, and I think that is the perfect word for it, magic.
Yeah,
it is just a fantastic watch. I never get bored of watching it either. Like, you know, even though I can almost quote it as they're speaking, I can almost talk along with the picture word for word. I love it. And the good thing about doing this podcast is, I'll openly admit, I normally only watch the first episode. So many a time I've put this on, I watch the first episode. I quite often go back and watch the pilot because I love comparing the two, because on the DVD you get the pilot episode as well. And which I'll come on to a little bit in a minute, actually, because I'll talk to you about that. But I very rarely go on and watch episodes 2, 3 and 4, because in my mind I always think they're unbearably slow, and I think, no, I can't bother to sit through that. It's really hard work. Obviously, yesterday, you know, for the sake of the review, I thought, right, well, I'll have to watch the whole thing for once. You know, I normally switch off at this point, but I'm going to have to carry on and watch the cavemen bit, and and I wasn't dreading it, but I was thinking, this is going to be a bit of a slog. I'm so glad that we do this podcast, because I have found a whole new love for this story as a whole. And I don't think I will be switching it off after episode 1 anymore. It's not to say that I think the episodes 2 to 4 are brilliant or amazing or anything like that, but they're so much better than I thought they were. I actually found myself really enjoying it, and so many bits I'd forgotten because I haven't watched them for so long, like the Doctor lighting up his big old pipe in episode 2, the Cave of Skulls, and then getting knocked out and things like that. And the acting was better than I thought. I seem to remember that the guys in it were really amateurish in their cavemen, like, you know, I thought it was all very, in my head, I thought it was all very staged, but actually they're pretty good, the people in it. It's just, I found a whole new love for it. So I've always loved episode 1. I've always thought it was just a fantastic piece of television, but I now really like episodes 2 to 4, and I think they're so different to the first episode. I think that's why in my head I always thought episode 1 was great, the rest wasn't very good, because I think the tone shift is pretty big, and they're so different to the first episode that I guess you're not always in the mood for it. But it was really good to just sit and watch this as a one story the other day. So I've got a whole new love for it, mate. I really, really enjoyed it. You know. Yeah,
it's interesting that you mention that, because some of our listeners have said very similar things about episode 1, An Unearthly Child, versus the next 3. And that's kind of a pattern where, you know, the first one has got, you know, the it's like the pebble, the first pebble that dropped in the pond, you know, and that's what people love. But then as the sort of ripple goes out, and people tend to switch off and they don't feel it's as good. But I completely agree with you, because I thought the same thing. I've watched the first one maybe, I'd probably say I've watched it around 4 or 5 times overall, and I've probably watched the next 3 maybe twice.
Yeah, I'm probably saying. I mean, I don't think I've watched them since the DVD came out. I think I watched them once with the production subtitles on, and probably wasn't even really paying that much attention. But yesterday, you know, with the review, you're sort of trying to watch it properly, you know, without looking at your phone and stuff. And I had a feeling, I thought, I'm just going to be sat looking at my phone all the way through this. I wasn't. I was actually I was loving Hartnell in it. I was just loving what was going on. And I just thought, I think because episode 1 is so strong, it does totally overshadow the rest of the story. They're decent episodes. They're not great. They're not bad. They're decent episodes, but they just get overshadowed by episode 1 because it's so good, I think.
Yeah. And I'm exactly the same as you, mate. I in my head, I thought, well, this is going to be fine. I'm going to watch the first one, and then I'll probably stop there, go and do something, come back, watch the others. But no, I just watched all 4 of them, just straight through, because Hartnell's the way that he played the Doctor, there always seems to be something that draws you in.
Yeah.
You know, no matter how many times you watch Hartnell, there's always little things that you just fall in love with all over again. You know, and
absolutely.
And because as the first Doctor, it doesn't get as much love these days as, you know, some of the other Doctors and so on. I don't think he's definitely not, you know, one of the more viewed Doctors.
No.
You know, so it's a shame, because every time that we review a Hartnell story, I just fall in love with his, you know, how he played the Doctor a little bit more every time.
Absolutely
and
the same.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I mean, I watched it, not yesterday, Monday night. And, I just thought to myself, I'm going to watch the first one and then I'll either go to bed and watch the others tomorrow or whatever. But no, it's like 10 to midnight. The 4th one finished. And I'm like, I'm really glad that I watched all of those, because it's, I don't know, it just, and I didn't want to stop there either. I thought, you know, I just want to carry on going through, you know, series 1, the proper series 1.
Yeah.
But I thought, no, I'm so tired. But
so you watched all 4 in one go?
Yeah.
See, to my amazement, so did I. And I hadn't planned to either. I thought, I'm going to watch the first 2.
Right.
I'm definitely watching the first 2. I thought, and then I'll probably, because I knew I'd got a staff party, I thought, I'm going to be hungover by the time I get to watch the other 2, and that's going to be murder. So, but I'd planned to watch 2 and 2. But no, just like you, got to the end of episode 2 and I thought, actually, I'm really enjoying this. I'm really going along with this. I'm just going to watch the next one, and maybe I'll save the part 4 and the pilot for another day. You know, no, I watched all 4 in one go as well, because I really got carried away with it. Yeah. And I think it is because of Hartnell. I don't know why, but I always just forget how much I love him. He's so, even when he's fluffing his lines a little bit and stuff, but he's so watchable. Yeah. And engaging, and he makes me laugh, because he's just so, especially in episode 1, like I said, when he electrocutes Ian, he's crazy. He's so unpredictable. You just don't know what he's going to do next. And he's tetchy and funny, and grumpy, and I love him. Yeah.
He was the Doctor as a character was written very well, right from the off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's I know he's evolved over the years, and as different actors have played him. They've brought their own thing, but I think one thing that's consistent with the Doctor is he's always written so interesting that you can't help but. I mean, I can understand why Colin Baker said that, where he's just standing in the doorway, you know, and 25 minutes later he's still there, you know, watching it, because just the Doctor as a character is just so intriguing, and I can only. This is going to sound really timey-wimey and really strange, but if I had a TARDIS, it would be amazing to go back to 63 and watch this first episode with other people to see what their reaction was. I know that sounds very weird, to own a TARDIS to go back in time to watch Doctor Who, you know, but it's I would just love to have seen people's reaction as they're watching it for the very, very first time, you know, to see, because it would have been, because the episode opens, I mean, the atmosphere in watching that opening scene where you see the policeman walking through the fog and we get to that thing, I mean, sends a tingle, even just talking about it. But people would have thought, you know, this is quite standard at the moment. It's not, when we talk about sci-fi, I haven't seen a spaceship yet. I haven't seen outer space yet. Or I haven't seen a ray gun or anything. This is quite normal. This is quite standard. And then we still don't see anything. It's just in a high school, and we've got teachers and so on. And it's not until we see the Doctor, and then we run inside the TARDIS. You know, Ian runs inside, and it's amazing. And it's just, I would have loved to have seen people's, because it's very different to what had been on ever before.
Yeah, it's very, I was going to say trippy, isn't it? It's just bonkers from the word go.
Yes.
I was going to say, actually, you mentioned the theme there, because we're so used to the theme now, and like when this starts, it does get allowed to play for ages. It doesn't just stop when the episode starts. The theme carries on while we've got that whole opening shot of the policeman and the junkyard and the TARDIS. But it's such an unusual theme.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? You've never heard that theme before. Never. No version of it. Anything. Can you imagine the first time someone heard that theme? They must have been like, "What is this?" It doesn't even sound like a piece of music. It's just mad. It's a really brave move, I think, having that theme.
Yeah.
And it's so iconic, and it's so different to anything else that they would have had. Like you said, to be able to sit with somebody and just hear that theme for the first time, I think would be amazing.
Yes, and it's like the Doctor. That theme has evolved over the years, and now it's become more of a standard thing. It's got a very definite time signature now, and now we've got drums and stuff like that, and it's become more of a sort of proper piece of music. But back then, this original one, it was very abstract and very off the wall, and people had never heard anything like it. I mean, that was the whole symphonic. What was the old sound lab called? The BBC something lab.
What's it called?
Derbyshire. Delia Derbyshire.
Delia Derbyshire.
She ran it.
What
was it called? The old
Radiophonic
Workshop.
Wasn't it?
Radiophonic Workshop.
Yeah.
So those guys it was very experimental and abstract. And that is another, you just kind of clap your hands together and look up, and you just kind of think, thank you so much, Verity Lambert, for putting your foot down and saying, we're going to do this. I don't care if it's different and we've never seen it before. I believe in it, and we're going to do it. It's going to be great. So
I think she did. Yeah, she did that with I think when they originally sort of looked at the, program before it went out, the hierarchy at the BBC, they were like, no, theme needs to change. So does the TARDIS sound effect. That needs to change. And she pretty much stuck to her guns. With that, and said, no, the theme's staying. I like the theme. It's what I wanted. And, so that it is, you've got Verity Lambert played a very big part in how Doctor Who started off. No doubt about that. The TARDIS sound effect did change slightly. Did you have a chance to watch the pilot?
Yes. Yeah. Because
I love the pilot. I find it extraordinary that they decided to reshoot. They filmed it. They showed it to who was it who ordered the reshoot?
It was Sidney Newman.
Sidney Newman, of course, yeah. Sidney Newman basically said, there's some good stuff here, but I want you to reshoot it, which was pretty unusual, I think, at the time. So they went back and they refilmed the whole thing from start to finish. And they changed a few bits. He'd watched what they'd done and made a few notes. He wanted the Doctor more subtle in his performance. He didn't want him quite so spiky. I mean, he's even more crazy in the pilot. I love him in the pilot. Like, there's a bit where he does a manic laugh, which is just brilliant. And they changed a few other things. One thing I do love about the pilot is it's got this thunderclap at the start of the theme, and I wish they'd left that in, because it starts and it just goes, and it really kicks off. I don't know why they got rid of that, because I love that. But the TARDIS sound effect is different in the pilot, and it has got the bit that we know in it, but it's not like all the way through. It's really, really, it's more sound effects, isn't it? Rather than just having that one sound effect that progresses, it's more a collection of sound effects. So you can hear the sort of main bit in there, but there's lots of other stuff going on. It's a more crazy, messy version of the TARDIS takeoff. So I am glad that they tweaked that slightly, because that is such an iconic sound. But the pilot is wonderful, isn't it? Like the TARDIS looks so clean in the pilot, whereas in the transmitted one, it looks really dirty. It's so clean in the pilot. And what's the other bits that I mean, there are quite a few different. The TARDIS inside looks a little bit different.
Yeah, their costumes are different.
Yeah. I actually think the performances from Ian and Barbara seem more natural in the pilot. They seem to just, I don't know, in the other one, when you rehearse something too much, you're almost just saying the lines.
You're going through the motions rather than, yeah.
They're a little bit more natural in the pilot, only slightly. It's quite subtle, but they seem to just be more flowing with it. Whereas in the transmitted version, they do seem to be a little bit like, you can sort of almost feel like they've done it 100 times before, and they're just sort of reading the lines a little bit. But I'll tell you, the other thing I was going to say is it is amazing that we've still got that footage. It it amazes me considering how much Doctor Who has been lost over the years. You know, like so much of Pat Troughton's era is lost. You know, thanks to the BBC wiping the episodes. I find it incredible that we've still got this pilot episode to watch. And also on the DVD, it's got the studio floor footage. So you can watch, it starts off as the pilot, and then there's a bit where Barbara goes into the TARDIS. And it shows you all the different takes of her doing that.
That's
and
right.
They basically, they record it as live. So you get like 2 different takes of that whole 15-minute scene. And that's the bit where they can't close the doors behind Barbara. So they just carry on. There's all this banging and clunking around, but going on behind it, but they just carry on. And the Doctor completely forgets his line at one point. Yeah. They just carry on. Yeah. It's amazing to see.
Yeah, people knock stuff over, and there's...
there's a bit where the junkyard, isn't it?
Yeah, camera bumps into a bit of the set, and I think Hartnell knocks something over at some point. In the junkyard, and it's very messy. It's very messy, but that's what TV was back in the day. You didn't have, because I think if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, and this is only after watching An Adventure in Time and Space, but they were sort of relegated to one of the really rubbishy studios at the BBC.
Yeah.
And they had it. I think they labelled it the broom cupboard or something. They nicknamed it, and so they had very, very basic studio to work with. It wasn't that great, and they would essentially they wouldn't have been afforded, you know, some of the more, you know, expensive set decorations and camera equipment and all that stuff. So they really just had to work with what they had. You know, the BBC said. Well, I think Sidney Newman basically said, you know, I think he bought into Verity Lambert more than he did the program itself.
Probably.
So I think he was more like, you know, we'll go with it, but I can't, you know, this is, you're going to have to work with the very basics of the basics. So it's no surprise that, especially in these first few episodes, there was, you know, the odd clanger and stuff going wrong, and camera equipment bumping in and all that stuff. But it's just, that's what makes it. That's what makes it what it is. People saw past that. You know, there wasn't, I mean, certainly there was no, of course there was no internet, but the people that did speak about it afterwards, you know, I'm pretty sure that they weren't all gathering around, you know, talking about, you know, mistakes from episode 1 and all that.
No, exactly.
They didn't care. They were talking about Hartnell and how good the story was, and what's a TARDIS, and, you know, and it was, oh God, we could talk about this for bloody hours, this one. But
I will say this, though. I wish that when Barbara enters the TARDIS, and this must have been a time restraint thing, it's so much better in the pilot, because she walks through the TARDIS door straight into the console room.
That's
and
right.
in the transmitted version, they've just done a jump cut. They obviously didn't have time to refilm that. I was going to say I'm surprised they didn't, because I suppose they could have edited the two together, but she's wearing different clothes, isn't she, in the pilot?
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, why didn't they just use that take? But they wouldn't have been able to, would they? Because they used the TARDIS take from the pilot at the end, because that's why the TARDIS keeps going from looking clean to dirty on the, you know, when the TARDIS lands. You know, there's an inconsistency there, because that's clearly from the pilot episode.
That's right. Yeah.
But I guess they could use that because it didn't matter. But I don't know. There are certain bits. I mean, I love the thunderclap in the theme. I wish they'd kept that. The bit where Barbara enters the TARDIS is better in the pilot. The Doctor's got some wonderful speeches, which get slightly altered in the transmitted version. I mean, that's one of the things I'd forgotten, really, is how much I love how Hartnell delivers some of the wonderful dialogue in this you know, first episode, like the clip you played in and all that. One thing that's changed for the better, though, he doesn't say my favourite line in the pilot. Well, he does, but he says it differently, and I don't know if it's a mistake or if it was actually rewritten, but in the transmitted version, he says that bit, ship? Yes, ship. This doesn't roll along on wheels, you know.
Oh,
and I've always loved that.
Yeah.
And in the pilot, he doesn't say that. He says something like, yes, ours, you know, just because this doesn't roll along on wheels doesn't make it, you know, doesn't mean it's not a spaceship like your things. Or so he says something different. It's like, oh, So I never know if he fluffed the line but made it funny, or if they rewrote it to be similar. But either way, I do prefer it in the transmitted one.
Yeah, I think they rewrote it.
They must have done.
I think so. Yeah. And I was going to say the differences between the pilot. One of the main differences that we spoke about before is just how Hartnell is a bit more. In the pilot, he's quite short-tempered and is a bit more abrupt with Ian and Barbara, and is quite, very borderline, quite rude.
He's a bit more sinister, isn't he?
Yeah. Whereas when they reshot it, I think they were told, or he was told, to sort of lighten it up just a little bit, soften it a little bit, because he was very, very. I mean, he's confrontational at the beginning, isn't he?
Yeah.
Especially towards Ian. And in the pilot, it's very, very evident that he read the script and really like, okay, I'm going to play this quite bullish at times as well. So that was another thing as well that's quite different. So in terms of direction and how Hartnell played those opening scenes, the interactions with Ian and Barbara is quite softer. In the transmitted version, yeah. So
yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating. Yeah, like you say, it was quite unheard of to go back and reshoot an entire episode, pretty much. Back then. But I'm
so glad it exists. I'm so glad it's in the archives. Because can you imagine if it was just myth lore, or there's this pilot that they did, and but we'll never see it because it was destroyed. It'd be heartbreaking. But to actually have it all there on the DVD, and it's brilliant.
Yeah, it's great. One thing that they struggled with, especially in the pilot, and one thing that they never fixed properly, even throughout many of the classic years, was the bloody TARDIS doors being able to stay shut. How difficult is it to get a door to stay shut? I mean, I remember watching the special features on certain classic ones, even up to, I think it was a McCoy story, or maybe I can't remember exactly, but having to have backstage people hold the doors shut because they wouldn't close by themselves and stay shut. It always has fascinated me because it's just a door. When you've got quite a complex prop like the TARDIS console, which has got 1,000 buttons on it, and it's got that big central column that goes up and down, and there's lights and everything. I know that was never bulletproof, but when you consider something like that versus a door, that's always fascinated me.
And I love the fact, I think it's in the second take of the pilot, you see they finally get the doors shut, and they're trying to do it so subtly in the second take, aren't they? Because they've made so much noise the first time. So you see it going back and forth. They finally get it shut. And then you just see this massive shadow of the person behind the round doors trying to creep off. It's like, it could not be more obvious. It's great to see, though. It's stuff like that. I just love looking out for that sort of thing.
TARDIS doors.
TARDIS doors, yeah, the bane of the. Actually, that's the other thing you're saying about differences. Like, this whole episode centers around the fact that these two people have walked to the TARDIS, they've seen it. The Doctor's like, it's too late now. They'll have to come with us. They've seen it all. We can't possibly let them go. You think, and then you sort of jump forward to say, I don't know, Black Orchid, and he's like, he's actually inviting people in the TARDIS. In that, he's like, oh, come on, come and have a look at this.
Yeah.
It's like, so the Doctor obviously over the years comes to realise that he can let people in TARDIS, but it's quite funny, he's electrocuting people in the first episode because they come in.
Funny, that bit. It's
live. Yeah, poor old Ian.
Poor Ian. Yeah. Let's talk about very briefly just sort of the overall story of these 4 parts, and before we move on to characters. But the first episode is kind of isolated. It very much revolves around Susan, I would say, because excuse me, you have Ian and Barbara, who are very concerned because she does come across, rightly so, as a bit of an oddball in the classes because she knows loads of stuff about, especially history and science. She's really, really up on those things because, and this is another thing, as a viewer back then, you wouldn't know why. You were intrigued as like, how does she know so much about this stuff? I mean, I can't wrap my head around, the fact that nobody would have known why at the time. But so she's a bit of an oddball, and then, they follow her to make sure she's okay. But she's really, I think, the basis for it is she's kind of settled into this time period, hasn't she? She's kind of found a place where she can sort of fit in.
Yeah.
You know, to this particular, the 20th century, as she puts it. So she can sort of fit in, but it's because of the concern by Ian and Barbara that she's, you know, they sort of get wrapped up in the whole time travel thing, you know, completely unintentionally.
Yeah.
They get wrapped up in it all. And then it's about Susan, you know, very much saying, I don't want to leave, you know, I don't want to go. If you're going to be like that, then I'd rather just leave you in the TARDIS and I'll stay here and all that. So it's that first 25 minutes is really about, well, I guess it's about Susan's relationship with the Doctor.
And it sets the tone that they're exiles, doesn't it? She's found somewhere where they can settle.
Yes.
So she wants to stay there, obviously, because of that. And he's just like, oh, well, you've ruined it all now. We'll have to go again. He's just ready to go off, and he's obviously not settled.
Yes.
I love it when he says, does he say it in the transmitted? Listen, Dr. Foreman. And he goes, Doctor Who? Like
yes,
it's obviously it's obviously not his junkyard, which makes you think, well, what's happened to Mr. Foreman? Got visions of Hartnell's Doctor like having him tied up in a cupboard somewhere, because you just don't know with Hartnell's Doctor at this point, you know.
Yeah,
he's obviously like taken over someone's scrapyard.
Because it's nice how they've kind of buried the TARDIS away in the corner as well.
Yeah,
that's another thing that's cool about this. Nothing is shoved in your face,
but it's all there.
But it's there. It's all there in plain. It's kind of hidden in plain sight. Is the best way to describe it. It's all there, but they've been. I mean, it's just genius from the writers and the people making it that they've done it that way, and that's still even. And there's so many things about this first episode that just turn my brain to mush, and that's one of the things that I absolutely love and fascinated by it is that. Back then, TV was very, you know, it's very simple. You know, it was like Join the Dots TV back then. It was like if you're going to have a program, especially a fictional program, then you absolutely had to explain who everybody was and what they were doing and why they were doing it. But this one, even in the junkyard, you only really see the TARDIS in shadow until they get closer to it. And then, you know, it's just not there. It's like, ta-da, here's the TARDIS, you know. It's not like that at all. It's
they're very adventurous in the way they've tried to shoot it as well. I think they've really stretched themselves for the time it was filmed. Do you know what I mean? Like you said, back then it would be a case of cameras there, point, shoot. Have we got everybody in a line to say their lines? You know what I mean? Everyone stood in the position that they're all facing the camera. In this, they're really trying, hence why there's quite a few bits where it's bumping into the set and that they're really trying to make something different, aren't they? Like the camera's moving in to film Barbara, but it goes out of focus, so it pulls back, and then we're getting a shot of her and Ian, which is just so, you know, taken for granted now. But back then they wouldn't really do that. They would have just literally had Ian and Barbara stood next to each other saying their lines, but they've tried to do something different. And like I said, sometimes the camera goes too far and out of focus or bangs into a wall. But at least they were trying to make something that people would be like, ooh.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't seen anything like this before. Yeah.
It can't be understated, really, just how important so many factors were in making this, because this could have gone terribly wrong.
Yeah.
This could have been a real flop because it's a massive risk, you know, bringing your lead character into the show. First of all, not first on the billing, so we don't see the Doctor at first.
No, he's not. It's about 11 minutes before he comes into it.
So, and we see the companions, or the eventual companions, and Susan first. We don't get an explanation for anything. We're just, you know, they just assume that the audience would watch it and go along with it. So, I mean, nowadays you could probably say, well, you know, there's so much money in TV that they could probably afford to take certain risks. But back in 1963, let's not forget how much of a massive risk it was to do that, because that we could have had nothing now if it wasn't because of those solid performances and those great first moments. Then we may not be sitting here, mate, talking about, you know, anything. It could have just been a
You'd never imagine that it would still be 50 odd years later, that it would still be on the TV and that we'd still be talking about it, would you? That if you could, like you say, if you go back in the TARDIS and say to, Sydney Newbin, Sydney, let's have a bet. What's that, mate? I'm going to wager now. What would the money have been back then? That we're still talking about Doctor Who in 50 odd years. He'd have snapped your hand off, wouldn't he?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah, although, technically he wouldn't have been able to get the money back. But, it's, the point stands. It's I don't think they would have had any idea back then, what history they were making.
Yeah. And one of the things that I do love about the show, whether it's the result of somebody passionate about it or the actors or whatever it might be, is that it's up until when it came back in 2005, before then, I love the fact that it was the rebellious little teenager of the BBC. Because even when this was first being made, this first episode, people didn't really like it.
No.
I remember a scene in the mockumentary where Verity Lambert goes to one of the set designers and asks him to design the TARDIS. And he just mockingly makes this strange little round tower thing with some roundels around the background and jokingly says, there you go.
Yeah.
And so nobody had any faith in it. Nobody really liked it. And then even as we get through the classic years, it's always been like the troubled little teenager of the BBC, where the head of the BBC, they don't really show much love to it. It's never been allocated a lot of budget back in the classic years. And it's always just got through. I mean, I know it was eventually cancelled in the McCoy years. However, it still did bloody well. It got through.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It's never been fully back then. It's never been fully supported by anybody high up or anything, has it? Until we get into the in 2005 when it starts making money and the BBC are like, all right, we can make
of course,
make good on this. Yeah.
It's all about the money.
Yeah, it was just in the background, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So I absolutely love that. Even back then, the very first episode when nobody really liked it, everyone thought it was just going to flop. It just did its thing, captured the minds and hearts of everyone. And I love that. That's what makes what we do just so cool, because we backed the right horse.
Yeah.
Is the right way to say it. Even back then, people that didn't really get it because nothing was explained, we were in the dark for a little while. People just, they were into it.
I think that a lot of people credit the Daleks, the next story, don't they, for being the story that really saved Doctor Who. I think a lot of people had written it off after the end of this story. So what was part 4 called? They'd sort of said, well, this isn't going to go on for much longer. The Firemaker. And then the Daleks, captured brought it into the big time. But yeah, you can't take away any credit from actually the very first episode. At all. I mean, that did as a bigger job as anything, really. As any first episode does. It's got to hook you, or you're sunk. Basically.
Well, that's it exactly. Yeah. And let's not talk about the Daleks because that's a whole nother.
Yeah, it's a whole other story. Yeah.
So the first episode it's quite isolated, and then the next 3 are very joined together. It's almost like one long episode, really, and it's all centered around the cave people and their desperate need to find fire, create fire. I mean, it's really simplistic storytelling.
Very, yeah.
It's basically, this is a series about time travel. Do we go forward or back? So they obviously decided that the easiest way, and it's almost like the Doctor's made that decision because he's proving to Ian especially that this is a time machine.
Yeah.
Because Ian's just basically tried to slap him down at every turn to say, this is not true. It's impossible. So the Doctor's like, okay, here we go. So they end up back in time. And what do you do when you go back in time? It's either dinosaurs or it's cavemen or maybe a combination of the two. But so the cavemen thing is just so simple. So it's just basically them trying to survive. How do we make fire?
Yeah, there's a bit of a who are the two guys? So you got two main cavemen, Zar and Cal, isn't it? Cal.
There's 3, isn't there? There's her.
Oh yeah, there's the dad one. And the woman, yeah.
Yeah, so Zar and Cal.
But who are the two that are sort of, they're having a bit of a testosterone
Oh, that's Cal
match.
and Horg, I think. Is it? Cal and Horg?
I thought it was Cal and Zar.
Or Cal and Zar.
Yeah, because they're having a bit of a, macho thing going on.
Sorry, yeah.
I bring the meat. Well, I started fire once. Yeah. Well, you haven't done it since. Well, I can. And so there's all that going on, isn't there?
Yeah,
like this thing between the two of them. I'll tell you what properly surprised me, actually, was I remember thinking, we're going to have one of those terrible 60s fight sequences in a minute where they just keep slapping each other. And I thought, oh, God. When we do get to that fight scene, it's so much more brutal than I remembered. I was thinking, this is not the 60s slapstick that I remember. They're actually like, it's not so much what you see, it's more the screaming from the two actors. It's pretty horrific, actually, for the time.
Yeah,
I was quite shocked by that. I mean, it's not, don't get me wrong, it's nothing violent, but it's just not the sort of pantomime fighting that I remembered. It's actually pretty nasty.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's not. Yeah, it's
done on film as well, which makes it seem more real somehow. I don't know. Yeah, it's much better than I thought.
It's quite brutal. I mean, doesn't one of them pick up a massive boulder and kills him like instantly, and then drags him off just drags him away.
He smashes his skull in, and apparently there was a sound effect that they removed. I don't know. Somebody said to them you need to take that off. That's too much. That would have been too much, because even just seeing him go Rah! And smashing it, you get the impression that he's smashed his skull in. Even that's pretty harsh for the time, for the era. So yeah, if you'd have had a crushing, I think they crushed a watermelon or something to make the sound effect. It says. So if they'd have had that on top, it's pretty heavy stuff for. For 60s TV. So yeah, I was really shocked by that. I just kept thinking, we're going to get these two are going at each other any minute now. They're going to have one of those terrible fights, and I'm going to have to sit through 5 minutes of them tickling each other with a rock, but it's done pretty well, actually. I thought. Yeah.
And the remaining storyline for pretty much these 3 episodes is I think this kind of set the precedence for Classic Who, where it's very much a sort of cat and mouse game.
Yeah, and it's very much escape, get recaptured, escape. Yeah,
and that's pretty much it. Because at this point in time, Ian and Barbara have obviously bought into the idea that time travel is possible, so that's no longer in question. So it's then just on to how do we escape the cavemen, and it's a nice sort of little trick by the Doctor, isn't it? Towards the end, he sort of fools them into thinking. That because we have the scene, don't we? The classic scene with the skulls on fire.
Oh yeah, that's good.
So it sort of gets wrapped up nicely, but then that's another thing that's quite good about this is it doesn't have the big sort of happy ending with our heroes sort of looking at the camera and it's like, next week our next adventure will be. It's literally back into the TARDIS and then we're off. It's just a continual. New adventure.
Yeah, and I like the fact that they don't know whether they can trust the Doctor. So there's in between all this sort of running around and escaping, Ian and Barbara are still not sure who this crazy old guy is. I mean, there is a bit where the Doctor picks up a rock and he's going to hit the unconscious caveman on the floor on the head. And Ian says to him, "What are you doing?" He's like, and that's pretty harsh. You don't really often see the Doctor doing stuff like that. So even at that point, just when Ian thought maybe he could trust the Doctor because he's helped him escape, he's then seeing this guy who's quite clearly prepared to kill someone for his own survival, picking up a rock. So again, that whole can I trust the Doctor, can't I, is all the way through this story, which I love. Just when they think, well, he might be all right. He's a bit tetchy, but he might be all right. Oh, no, he's got a rock in his hand. You're never quite sure. Yeah. Which I thought was really good.
Yeah. I mean, Ian and Barbara, they do kind of, they do sort of get into it because they have no choice, because they're there in the situation. So I think ultimately it's down to, isn't it Ian that, he obviously knows how to make fire a lot more than the cavemen do.
Yeah.
Which sort of gives them their opportunity to then bugger off to the TARDIS and escape. But I know I keep saying this, but another thing that's really great about this is the fact that the TARDIS is just some thing that seemingly doesn't work as it should. That's another thing that we've never seen. I mean, in sci-fi at that point, every ship was this really clean, futuristic-looking, rocket-shaped thing that, worked marvellously all the time. Whereas here we got the TARDIS. When the Doctor first steps out of the TARDIS, he sort of looks around and he's like, "Why is it still?
Why hasn't it changed?
Why hasn't it changed?" Yeah, because that's the introduction that we now know as the Chameleon Circuit, which has been bust ever since then.
Yeah,
and that's a strange thing as well. It's like, why would our hero, quote unquote, be traveling around in a broken spaceship? It makes no sense at all. And then he has no clue where he is, because when they escape and they finally go off in the TARDIS, he can't be sure where they are. He's kind of, the TARDIS has, almost randomly placed them somewhere. And the Doctor doesn't know, what's going on 100% with it. So again, more risk taking.
Yeah, because they're like, "Can't you get us back? Don't you know how to use this thing?" And he's just, "Well, of course I do, but not really." Yeah. Yeah, it just adds another great element into it, doesn't it? That they could just end up anywhere and they not really control, because it'd be so boring, wouldn't it, if the Doctor could just say, "Yeah, I'll just take you back home now," which it's really weird, actually. It depends which story it is, doesn't it? Sometimes the Doctor seems to be able to just land exactly where he wants, and other times he's out of control. It's more fun when he can't. It's much more fun when he can't just conveniently, go exactly where he wants to be or needs to be. Yeah,
it's cool. And before, just very quickly, what do you feel about the injection of Clara into this story plot from? What was the episode where we see her go back through all the different Doctors and we see how she's helped him? Was it the scene where Hartnell's escaping from Gallifrey and she says, "You should take this one"?
This one, yeah.
What do you reckon?
The name of the Doctor, was it? Was it named Doctor? Well, no, I don't like that.
Or do you reckon it should have just been completely left in mystery about how he obtained it and all that?
Yeah, it's another detail that just did not need explaining or filling in. Or no. I don't like that. I just don't like it. No, I don't like it. I don't like the thought of Clara being there when the first Doctor's escaping or running off or whatever. No, I don't even. I to be honest, I'd quite forgotten about that until you just reminded me. Yeah, I remember when they put those clips together. Sort of, it's always nice to see old clips in Doctor Who. You know, like when they're being tortured and they have a flashback on the screen and you get to see all the Doctors. It's all very exciting. But no, I just.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, mate.
Yeah, I don't think it needed it.
Yeah. Right, let's talk about Susan first.
Susan.
Carol Ann Ford. Saw her at the proms a few years ago.
Yeah.
She's cool.
She looks, she's got very strong features, so she's good casting in terms of her look, because she looks a little bit alien, and I mean that in the nicest way, by the way. She's just got a very strong features which make her stand out. So when she's acting alien, especially in the pilot, she's more alien, if you know what I mean. When she's doing that weird drawing and that, she's definitely got something about her which makes her very mysterious and all that sort of thing. So in terms of that, she's good casting. She is a bit shrieky. I mean, when she's screaming in episode 2, she doesn't do scream acting particularly well. She's pretty young though, I think, when she filmed this, wasn't she? So she's probably quite inexperienced as an actor at that point, I would assume. But I think she is good casting. I do like her as Susan.
Yeah, she's great. I mean, she was very young. I mean, surprisingly, she'd already done sort of half a dozen TV shows before that.
Really? Oh, right. Okay.
But she was very young, yeah. And she's, how old is she now? She must be in her 70s now. But she, she's very, very good casting. And it's a real shame. And maybe it's not a shame, but it's a real shame that she wasn't included in the 50th.
I would have loved to have seen her in the 50th. Genuinely would have loved. You could get rid of all that Clara nonsense that you just mentioned and just put Susan in it, and I would be absolutely made up. Yeah, and Chesterton, William Russell. They to me, it needed something like that in the 50th. But particularly Susan, she's an important character. when you go back. And there is clear chemistry between her and William Hartnell.
Yeah.
I think their relationship, I mean, again, this comes back to the brilliant adventure in space and time. You know, he almost became like a father figure to her, whether she wanted it or not. He was quite protective of her in real life, off screen, wasn't he? And you get that feeling even from this first episode, really, that they do work well together. So yeah, I like Susan. She is a bit shrieky, and she does go over the top, but I do think she suits the part. Yeah,
absolutely, I agree. And I think I've been calling it an adventure in time and space. It's in space and time, isn't it? I can never remember which way around it is, but yeah. And she did come back though. She did come back for an episode. She's in the Five Doctors. That's it. Yeah, she's in the Five Doctors. Yeah. And she's in a couple of the McGann Big Finish audios, and I'll tell you, they're great. They're really worth listening to. Her and McGann are great together. Oh, cool. I'm being careful what I said because they lead up to quite a shocking revelation. It's really good if you get a chance to listen to them. One's called An Earthly Child, I think was a special release they did. Yes. Yeah, really, really good. So yeah, Carolyn Ford, good cast. Good casting. Yeah. Ian and Barbara. Really love Ian and Barbara myself. Fantastic casting. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. They've got that because of the time this was set. They have got that very old school, very British, almost sort of British newscaster kind of vibe. You know, that's how people spoke back then. So they're terribly British. You know, there's no escaping that. Whereas Susan, she doesn't seem to come across as much as that. But those two, they're very proper. You know, teachers, respected. Very proper, but fantastic. They work really well together. They're great. And it wasn't until I rewatched Hartnell's story that we did a few episodes ago that I realised just how well they are, which was The Romans. Yeah. That's a really good one to see those two sort of bounce off of each other and with the Doctor as well. But straight off, you know, there's no warm-up with those two. Straight into it. They're great. I think because they're clearly got Susan's best interest at heart, you instantly know that they're quite warm, they're quite good meaning characters, I think, so you instantly warm to them. They're both great in the parts they play. I think Jacqueline Hill is just, I can't put my finger on it. Like you said, they're from a different time. They're like, they just work so well together, and like you said, they're very well mannered. Quite old school, but I just love. Well, I love William Russell and Jacqueline Hill as actors, but I just love the characters of Ian and Barbara as well. You always get the impression that there might be something going on there, but it's never spelled out on screen because there's such great chemistry between this TARDIS team. Like I said, when they get going, there's really good chemistry between these two and the Doctor and Susan. The four of them are great together, but you always get this feeling that that they're looking out for each other, and maybe there might be a little bit of by the end of it, you'd like to think when they get dropped off and they're on that bus going back to wherever they're going back to, Shoreditch probably, you'd like to think surely they got together after all this, but we didn't need to see any of that, and we never really do get that spelled out on screen, do we? But they genuinely seem to look out for each other, which I love. Yeah, it's true. There's definitely that there. You do kind of say, are they, aren't they, will are they, aren't they? Won't they? Because they do work well together. But I think overall they just, especially as they spend more time together travelling with the Doctor, they do definitely grow closer together. Their friendship, whatever you want to call it, is very... strong. Yeah. I was just thinking about William Hartnell again, how his sort of off screen, I think he became very close to them as well, didn't he? I seem to remember reading or hearing or something that when they decided to leave, he was furious. He was like, what do you want to leave for? Because he really had grown fond of them by then. And the same with Caroline Ford, I think, when she decided to leave. He was just saying, well, why do you want to go? Don't go. So they really became a family, these four guys, I think. And it totally shows on screen. Like, you really feel the bonding as they go on
all these adventures from here onwards.
Yeah.
You totally
Yeah.
get to see these four bonding as friends and and as actors. Yeah. They're great together.
And he's still I mean, he's still going. Fair play. He's 92 now.
Yeah, William Russell. Yeah, that's why I'd love to see him come back. I mean, yeah, but I would love to see Susan. I do think she should have been in the 50th. I really do. I think she was there at the beginning. Well, I think they both should have been in it 50th, actually. They were right there at the start. I think they should have been in it to celebrate 50th. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. But yeah.
And Hartnell.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, there's no other words, is there?
There's just no way. He's fantastic. I think because he'd been playing very similar roles for quite a long time in his career, very often the Sergeant Major, wasn't it?
Yes.
He relishes in being given this part of something totally different. You can just tell that he's absolutely loving it. He's like, I can't imagine he did anything like this before. Certainly nothing that I know of. He was always the very, Sergeant Major, stiff upper lip and all that sort of thing. So he's playing this alien, cranky old Time Lord rattling around in a time machine shaped like a police box. He's just goes with it. I just love him as the Doctor. Just like you said at the start, more I watch him, the more I just think he's great. So underrated.
He is. He's probably one of the most underrated Doctors.
He is.
Of all. And it's a real shame because I'm not saying that all of his stories for the first, what was he did, like 5 series or something.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that all of those were great because there are a few clangers like every Doctor's run, but there is so much there to like. And pretty much, even if the stories weren't that great, his performance, he never ever looks like he's just going through it for the sake of it. He always looks like he's having whether he's playing grumpy or he's having a particularly amusing episode like the Romans or whatever it is, he always looks like he's really enjoying himself. He's having the best time.
Yeah, he does. He just looks, he totally puts himself in that role. It doesn't feel like an actor playing it. He just feels like he's totally immersed himself as the Doctor.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, just very quickly, I must tell you, when I went to the Power of the Daleks screening at the BFI, Frank Skinner did a little talk at the start, and they said to him, "Is Pat your favourite Doctor?" And he said, "I love Pat, but I think William Hartnell might be my favourite." So he's just like we said, very underrated. And Frank said what he loves about watching Hartnell is that it reminds him of like watching a waiter carrying a tray of drinks for a busy crowd. You're always watching. You're always on the edge of your seat, just waiting to see if if he gets his lines out or if the waiter drops his drinks. He said, "I just love watching Hartnell because he's always on the edge of the performance, and you just never quite know what's going to happen next." He said, "That's why I love Hartnell," and that sums it up brilliantly for me. I think, that's what I love. I just watch him. Never know what he's going to do next. Never know if he's going to get the line right. Don't care if he does. I mean, we all stumble over lines. When we watch a TV program and they're word for word perfect, I think we forget that actually we're not like that in real life. We all stutter and don't get the right words out or can't think of the right word at the time. So it's actually much more natural.
Yeah.
And obviously, I suppose given the chance, they would have gone back and shot a lot of takes, but they didn't do that back in the day. So if they do get it wrong or whatever, they just go with it.
Absolutely.
And I love that. I love that about Hartnell. He just doesn't stop. He's like, it's just a train that keeps on going. Yeah.
Yeah. It's more natural. I mean, I can think of 3 or 4 times where we've had a tweet or a Facebook message to say, why have you been saying this? It's this. And you can't get too hung up on it, but it is more natural because like you say, we all say the wrong word. I mean, listeners of our show will know that we do that all the time.
Yeah.
We know we're thinking about one Doctor, we might say another, or an episode, or a thing, or whatever. And what's quite cool is they never, I say never, they did leave in his fluff lines in a lot of episodes.
Most of them, yeah.
Yeah, and it's, and that's not, maybe because they just didn't want to cut and do it again, because it's just, like you say, it's natural. That's just how he did it.
They didn't have the time. They used to switch the lights off, didn't they? 10 o'clock, whether you're in the middle of a scene or not, the BBC, the lights are off.
Yeah.
Which it just, and it makes it more fun because you are always on the edge, I think, just waiting for something to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's sad that he didn't get to reprise his role fully in the Three Doctors because I think he was quite ill. That was only a couple of years before he died. And I think he was quite ill at that point. So I remember he did film something, didn't he? It was like a message for the other doctors that they saw on a screen, which he did in a studio somewhere. But it's a shame because I think he had a much bigger part written for that, so that him, Troughton and Pertwee would all be as a gang, sorting it out. But
do you know what I love about that is that he was like even right to the end was just so keen to do it because when they phoned him up, he agreed to do it. They're like, Hartnell's on board. And they're like, that's good. And then his wife phoned, didn't she, about a week later and said, I don't know, he can't do it. I don't know why he's agreed to it. Like he must be mad. There's no way he can do it. But he still, right to the end, was like, yes, I am the Doctor. Of course I'm going to do it. And I love that about Hartnell.
Yeah.
He's there right to the end.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about people like David Tennant being great ambassadors for the show and all the rest of it, but, he was the first to really... Oh, of course, he was a first Doctor, but even when he stopped being a Doctor, he, like you say, I think he loved doing it so much. He just was just into everything. And
apparently, I mean, it's clear that he loved this role.
Yeah.
So, I can't say anything else really. He's just brilliant. I know he's not everybody's favourite Doctor or whatever, but I think sometimes you just need to go back and have a look at him and just think, actually, this guy started it all.
Yeah. If you're listening and you haven't seen much of Hartnell, we urge you to, just Google it. Just put top 10 Hartnell episodes or get in contact with us. We'll throw you some suggestions. There is so much great Doctor Who from his era. You're missing out on so much cool Doctor Who if you've not seen much of the Hartnell stuff. It's he's brilliant.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah. That's
right. It. I think we've gushed enough over Hartnell and everything. So, unless you've got anything else to say, anything else to add, we're going to move on.
No, not really. No,
we said it all. So let's do scores.
Okay.
I think it's you to go first.
Okay. I found this difficult to score, actually. Okay. Mainly because to me, it does almost feel like two different stories. Mm-hmm. So, because I think I would score episode 1 really, really highly. But then as much as I enjoyed episodes 2 to 4, they aren't as strong. So
common problem.
It's difficult. Yep. So it's difficult. So I'm going to go with a 7.5 as an overall score. But I think if I was scoring episode 1 on its own, I'd probably score it 8.5. It's really high in my, I really like episode 1. Yeah. But as an overall story, I'll go 7.5.
Okay. So you and I are on the same page again, not like we were last week.
No.
With a big disparity. I am also 7.5 for the 4 episodes. If I was just scoring the first one, that would be an 8.5 for me.
Right, same. Yeah. I mean, it'd probably be a 10 on enjoyment level.
Oh, enjoyment. Yeah, absolutely.
Episode will be a 10. But if you sort of take into account all the other stuff, like the technical stuff, I think it's 8.5. But so we're both on the same score this week.
Yeah, we're back on it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right. What did our listeners think? Over on Twitter. Let's see. Patrick at StillTroxis says, well, this story, what do I think of it? It's okay. Well, it is the first ever story now. Overall, I do love it. 8.5.
Oh, okay, right.
Yes. Rick Moran says, back where it all began. Big smiley face. Ken Major says, first episode in an incredible bit of television, not just Who. Can understand why they include the other 3 for the release.
Yeah.
Yes. We had one audio clip in this week. This was from Owen Daly.
Hello, Gary and Adam. I hope you're both well and enjoying the show this week. So, An Unearthly Child, the definitive article of a perfect introduction. It introduces the characters brilliantly, as we have the mystery of Susan and the Doctor and the relatability of Ian and Barbara, making a great dynamic and chemistry for the original crew. There's a great untrusting relationships between them at once. The Doctor kidnaps them, which really added the suspense and believability to the situation. Seeing these people had just been whipped out of their own time, put in a time machine and kidnapped and been sent back to the Stone Age, which was fantastic. One thing I love, though, is the development we get to see throughout the story and the entire show of the Doctor warming to these people, becoming more human, I guess, and getting a much more loving relationship for his friends and family. As a viewer, I can imagine the intrigue that was brought by it back in 1963, and I can just imagine how magical it was first time round, sitting down and seeing this brand new hell-round effect for a title sequence, this state-of-the-art TARDIS. Well, probably wasn't state-of-the-art, but still, it's just magical, fantastic, so good. Some say that episode 1 is brilliant, but sadly the rest drag. But I beg to differ, as I think it's a great pure historical with the caveman being believable, and there's some not too shabby fight scenes near the end. Lots of love for this, and I gotta say one last thing about the DVD, the pilot on the DVD release, because Jesus, with that pilot is awful. It's brilliant and a great variation of the story. Definitely a 7 out of 10. See you all next week.
Thank you, Owen.
Excellent. Cheers, Owen.
Over on Facebook, Kevin Mullins says, perhaps the most important episode in the show's history. Introduces us to the Doctor and the TARDIS. Think about that word. How many people can claim to have invented a word? We use TARDIS all the time now to describe something that is deceptively large on the inside. But before the 23rd November, it simply didn't exist. Episode 1 scores a billion out of 10. While episodes 2 to 4 are a 6. Loved the clipped middle-class cavemen. I've never thought about that, actually. No. And Kevin also put he's really good at Doctor Who artwork. He put another piece on there. Thank you, Kevin. Great stuff. I
saw it. Yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
Charlie Turner gives the episode... he gives it a positive review. It's good. I can see why most people call it repetitive, but to me, it's not a bad thing if it's done right. I would normally have more to say about this since it's the first episode ever, but I can't think of what else to say. One thing I will, though, it's really hard to pick a rating for it. If my knowledge is correct, I give it an 8.5 for its mostly good storytelling. Would have been more if less on the repetitive side of things. See you guys next week.
Excellent. Cheers.
Thank you, Charlie. Joe Sweeney.
It's hard to rate. Yeah.
It is, yeah. Where to start? I can say that episode 1 is a unique piece of Doctor Who history. Starts off brilliantly with Susan, seemed like an ordinary teenager. Ian and Barbara have concerns about her high intelligence over other students. Decides to follow her, which leads to the junkyard with the introduction of the TARDIS, so on and so on. William is such a perfect choice for the role. He has grandfather type, even though... he does grouchy, but he does have this warmth and kind side to his personality. Ian, Barbara, Susan are very good companions. Huge thank you to Sidney Newman and Verity Lambert for bringing this show to life, even with the amount of hard work they had to put in and deal with at the BBC. Thankfully, Verity chose to ignore them all and had high faith in the show to continue on, for which she proved them all right. A great episode. I consider liking the first one more. The other 3 were a mixed bag, 7.5.
Yeah, fair play.
Joseph Howarth, fire, you make fire. Simon got fire. They ought to summarise the story. I will say it does a very good job setting up the main cast and what the show is about, seeing as it's the very first Doctor Who in general, as a very strong first part. Ian and Barbara are very likeable. But the problem I have with this is the Doctor's very rude and violent. The story kind of slows down when we get to the cavemen. It becomes too laboured and boring, and everyone just talks about fire for the next 3 parts. It was probably better as a story when it first came out. It was a new show at the time, but I don't think it's as good as it is nowadays. It's not terrible, not boring. 6 out of 10.
Yeah, fair play.
Sammy Satine. Ian and Barbara have suspicions about their student Susan, which leads them into a junkyard where they stumble across the TARDIS for the first time. This is also their first encounter with the Doctor, and they have their very first adventure in time travel, going back to caveman times. It's an interesting start that would, of course, last 53 years and counting. I find it interesting that the Doctor isn't interested in taking charge, though. Ian tells the cavemen he is the leader. I find Susan and Barbara a bit whiny, even if Susan is the only one who has worked out a way back to the TARDIS. I do like how the Doctor wants to check the radiation settings before leaving the TARDIS, something his modern counterparts forget.
Yeah, that's true.
It's nice how the last part of the last episode leads into the next adventure, and they give you the little bit as well. Better than any Next Time trailer in some ways. Overall, begins strong, but ends up a little bit average. 6 out of 10.
Very good point about that, actually. It is more fun, isn't it? If we just get led into the next one, but don't have a Next Time trailer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I quite like that.
Yeah, by doing the Next Time trailer, a lot of fans decide that they don't like it.
Yeah,
before it's even seen it. So, yeah, I agree. Matthew Webb says, the first part is an iconic piece of television I could rewatch endlessly. Having the following 3 episodes aren't too much to rave about. I love the characterizations of the TARDIS team, but I feel the villain of the story is a bit naff. So 6 out of 10. Lewis Palmer, good start to the show. The first episode is one of the best episodes in Who history, although it's a bit weird that 2 teachers decide to follow a teenager home. Other than that, it's an exceptional bit of 60s TV and I love it. The other 3 episodes are very mixed. There's a bit of quality shift between the first and the other 3. Overall, it's a good way to start off the show. 6 out of 10.
Cheers, Lewis.
Charlie Turner. Oh, sorry, he adds on from his previous review. I completed my entire Doctor Who DVD collection.
Really?
All the ones that have been released anyway. Sorry to mention that, but well done, Charlie.
Well done.
That's good.
Yeah.
George Coppen. It all started out as a mild curiosity in a junkyard. Where do I start? It was just brilliant cast and characters that started it all off. 7 out of 10.
Good. Yeah.
Ollie Tanner. Welcome, Ollie. Having not watched much classic Who, this story made me want to see it more than I have. At the beginning of it all, it's easy to see why the show was so successful. Wasn't exactly thrilling, but still interesting with good acting on the whole. I enjoyed Hartnell as the Doctor, a bit grumpy though as the story went on. Certainly an interesting start, but it got a bit boring towards the end. But I liked how they tried to trick the tribe with the skulls. A good introduction to the characters. 7.5.
Yeah, that's good, isn't it? The bit with the skulls.
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah.
Very simple idea. Yeah.
Very simply, Brian Dobson says, love it.
Oh,
8 out of 10.
Good.
And lastly, Miles McKenzie says, I was so desperate to watch this when I was younger, and I finally got to watch it a few years ago. It's probably one of the most enjoyable watches of Doctor Who for me. William Hartnell perfected the Doctor, and his granddaughter Susan and the teachers from school are amazing. At the time, the way they made the story was a very good attempt at recreating the Stone Age. The story itself does feel a little slow in some places, but overall a very strong script for the start of Doctor Who. 9 out of 10.
Yeah, good stuff.
Great stuff. Did you have anything on the Geek's Handbag?
Yeah, I had a couple. Elliot Beasley sent me a tweet here. He says, the very first serial of Doctor Who can be split into 2 clear parts. There's the first episode, An Earthly Child, where 2 teachers follow a teenager home to a junkyard. Then there's the remaining 3 episodes, which center around the group of time travelers trying to escape from prehistoric cavemen to the TARDIS. The first episode is truly an iconic piece of television, right from the theme music at the start to the great cliffhanger at the end. I really love the sense of awe and mystery in this episode, something that many people would say has been lost the longer the show has gone on. This man isn't a Time Lord with 2 hearts from the planet Gallifrey in the constellation of Kasterborous, but just an exile wanderer in the 4th dimension. Yes, there is a decrease in quality in the next 3 episodes, but I think the story still holds up. The landscape set is convincing, and the simple plot is a good way to introduce the new characters. Overall, the story deserves a solid 8.10. Yeah, some very good points there. Right, so moving over to Geeks Handbook Facebook, we got a couple on here. So Matt Whelan says, it's a great introduction to the character of the Doctor, or as he was credited then, Doctor Who, something Peter Capaldi likes, isn't it? And I enjoyed how the Doctor didn't have any time at all for Ian's remarks and just bit back with sarcasm. Definitely made even better by seeing it semi-reconstructed with an adventure in space and time. Worth checking out the unaired pilot that's on there as well. The doors on the set kept flying open as you could see the cameraman several times. Yeah, I know. It is worth having a look at that. Patrick Sherwood says, I really like the story. It's it's not one of the best stories in the world, but because it is the first ever, I appreciate it for that. I really like And I really think that when you watch this, you should also watch Adventure in Space and Time, because that is also something that I think really works when watching the story. Overall, he says he's going to give it 8.5 out of 10. So yeah, agree with him about Adventure in Space and Time. It does work nicely together with this one. Jason Howes, episode 1, An Earthly Child, is the most intense episode of Doctor Who ever. We see the Doctor and Susan from outsider's viewpoint. We see them in their brilliance and their faults as well. The Doctor is basically the villain in it. We don't know who he is or his agenda. So Jace likes this one. Paul Skevington, just think, if the Doctor had smashed that caveman's head in with the rock, we'd have that's the bit I was on about earlier, we'd have never had a pacifist Doctor. Instead, we would have ended up with a violent monster who went round crippling people using some sort of fictional material art with a silly name. Hang on. What's he referring to?
Yeah.
I think, that is the bit I was on about there. Quite shocking. I think they toned that down, as they did the pipe smoking. Yeah. And finally, Aaron Ball says, a fantastic, underrated serial. People say the other 3 episodes are bad, but I think the way the caveman were portrayed was great. The story is still there, as well as the first Doctor being fantastic. Aaron gives it 8 out of 10. So yeah,
very cool.
A lot of positive stuff. Nothing negative, actually, was there?
Not really.
Particularly.
I think it's more about the slowdown in pace for the remaining 3 stories and so on.
It's a definite gear change.
Yeah.
But,
sorry, you had one more review in. This was from Adam Pink, who sent in a message, and I keep calling him Danny Pink, so apologies for that. He says, it's got to be an unearthly child has got to be greatly respected as the adventure that started it all. The first 2 parts are excellent, the first especially being a staple of British television. It's after the Cave of Skulls that I feel it becomes a slight drag in some places. One moment I really like is when the Doctor picks up a rock to cave someone's head in. It shows now with hindsight that this is the Doctor before he is the Doctor, quote unquote, so to speak. Isn't it until the events of the Daleks and travelling with these 2 humans, he really grows into his character. Great story, some lovely moments of history, 8 out of 10. Yeah,
okay, yeah, so some good points there. I nearly called him Danny. Adam.
Yes.
Adam Pink.
I think I've called him Danny Pink like almost every time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you very much, guys, for your reviews and thoughts on An Unearthly Child. We love it. It's clear you guys love it. It's just the other few episodes, you sort of have to be in the mood to continue watching those ones. But I've found a new level of appreciation for those anyway.
I definitely have. Yeah.
Next week, it's modern Doctor Who. So, dude, what are we going to do next Friday?
Next week, 10th Doctor story, we'll be reviewing The Girl in the Fireplace.
David Tennant.
Back to David Old Tennant. Yeah.
Ah, yes. The Girl in the Fireplace.
Yeah.
So we look forward to your views and thoughts on that one. Just like I said last weeke or the week before, can't remember. Never can remember. We record on a Wednesday now. So look out for the Facebook and Twitter stuff that goes out on a Monday lunchtime-ish. And then, just get your thoughts and reviews in. And we will read them out, or try and read most of them out.
That's it. Put our teeth in. A few fumbled lines, a few boom mics issues, but we'll get them read.
Of course. And I think we're going to do there for 124. Thank you. For sticking with us and listening through as we've complimented and got teary-eyed, and gushed and all that stuff over Hartnell's first outing.
I'm glad we got so many positive comments,
Yeah, I think deservedly so for Hartnell.
I thought it was going to be more mixed. Yeah, I thought, but lots of positivity, which is great.
Yeah. No, it is great. And just to reiterate what I said as well, if you haven't seen much of the Hartnell era, it's absolutely worth checking out some of his stories. If you're unsure on which ones to get stuck into, just fire us a tweet or hit us up on Facebook, whatever, and we'll send over some cool recommendations. to watch some of his cool stuff. Because he's a fantastic doctor.
He is.
Very much so. Head over to our website, www.bigblueboxpodcast.com. From there you can listen to all of our previous episodes, plus you can link off to all the social stuff. So give us a like and a follow on the old Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all that jazz. And you can also link off to iTunes. And if you are an iTunes listener and you can spare a minute to give us a review and a rating on there, that would be amazing, because that really helps us out loads in the old iTunes stuff.
It does. Bumps us up, doesn't it?
Indeed, yeah. Check out Adam's channel.
Yeah.
Don't you know? He runs his own thing over on YouTube and Facebook called The Geek's Handbag. You just need to search for that in YouTube and Facebook and check out all of his cool videos.
That's it.
You could spend a good few hours going through all of his... There's so many.
There's hours of content.
Loads, yeah. So if you're into like product unboxings, reviews, conventions stuff, vlogs, it's all there.
Yeah.
All there for the modern geek to absorb like a sponge.
I like that. I might use that.
Yeah, coming at you from a sponge in the middle of nowhere. Anyways, we look forward to listening to you. Tell us your thoughts on The Girl in the Fireplace.
Yeah.
And until next week, my name's Gary.
My name's Adam.
And remember, Lottie!